Parent-teacher conferences are on February 18th. This was something Ashley had heard repeatedly for the past 2 weeks. Whether it was from teachers, students, posters, or persistent school emails that somehow reached her, it was all the same annoyance to her. She hadn't as much as marked her calendar for the pointless event, and she never intended to. So when the 18th day of February came along, and her teacher announced the importance of the day, Ashley silently struggled to not tear the hair out of her head. The constant repetition of the singular phrase was not the only thing that frustrated her, because in a bizarre coincidence, the uttering of the words were almost always preceded by a proclamation of a test or a project of some sorts. In fact, the entire day was filled with stress and an irritating strain that formed in the young girl's head. The only escape she seemed to find in her daily routine was the short breaks between classes. These safe havens were almost always filled with music accompanying Ashley in her strolls from point A to point B. However, on a rare occasion such as today, she would find herself talking to a friend, or an even greater abnormality, a group of friends. On February 18th, she was stopped in between 4th and 5th block for her opinion of a dress another student was flaunting. Ashley and the other girls were quickly wrapped up into conversation that varied in topics. However, their chit-chat hushed when someone else decided to enter the discussion. The new participant in the circle's gossip was a person that Ashley didn't know. She listened closely to the others' talk and was able to deduce that the boy's name was Michael. She also learned that he was fairly new to their school and had only been attending for the 2 weeks prior. Ashley's conversation with the bunch was incredibly more enjoyable with Michael amongst them. His quick-witted humor and snide comments added an extra flair that the group lacked earlier. He was even able to get Ashley to laugh to an uncontrollable state, in which she attracted the attention of her vice principal, Mr. Garth. She didn't realize why he was so angry until her friends scattered off into different directions, and the man asked, "Why aren't you in class?" She hadn't been aware that she missed the bell, or that she was so entranced in discussion with Michael. Ashley whipped her head from side to side to find her friends, but they weren't there. In fact, no one was. This was a clear sign of her tardiness that she blatantly missed. She tried to explain this all to her principal, but his aggressiveness refused to cease. According to him, regardless of an offense's intention, it was an offense nonetheless. This specific offense's reparation was a phone call made to Ashley's parents. She released a stress-induced sigh and followed the man to his office. Fortunately for Ashley, her parents were both at work, and no one could receive the incoming call. However, her vice principal was absolutely furious and demanded to talk to her parents that night at the parent-teacher conference. If they failed to attend, Ashley would get 2 weeks' worth of in-school suspension. She was outraged by this, but she understood its causation. A large amount of kids, some of which were the ones she was speaking with, had been skipping class. When the parents found out, they immediately blamed the staff, specifically Mr. Garth. Her punishment was one of many crude attempts of controlling the students. Ashley left the office with an incredibly larger headache than she thought was possible. On her way to 5th block, she encountered something else she didn't think was possible. Michael sprung out from around the corner and startled her. After he slightly teased her being easily frightened, he apologized for abandoning her earlier. Ashley, of course, didn't care that he was sorry, or at least acted like she didn't. However, he was persistent with his remorse, and she was inclined to believe him. In order to make it up to her, he invited her to spend some time with him and a few friends after school. Ashley's heart momentarily lifted at the idea, and hastily agreed. She then proceeded to class with a little more skip in her step. At the end of the day, the bell rang and a torrent of overzealous children was released upon the world. They all rushed onto their buses and wished their school farewell, all except Ashley, Michael, and a few others. The band of these students began to follow their regular routine of strolling down the road to a nearby convenience store. While walking, the children disbanded into subgroups. 3 were on the left side of the road, 4 were on the right. Ashley and Michael were, however, in their own cloud. They walked in sync of each other while talking and seeing which one of them could walk longer on the ice-covered road without slipping. She wished that their walk would never end, because this journey was far more marvelous than the destination. Most of the group rampaged the inside of the store, coming out with chips, soda, and 3-day-old muffins. The only 2 that didn't go inside were the 2 preoccupied lovebirds. Michael was being humorous, flirty, and incredibly charismatic. His charm was enough to win Ashley over 10 times. So, when he leaned in, she couldn't help but fulfill his whim. They clutched each other as they kissed, and they cuddled after the embrace. Michael's hands were cold when he wrapped them around her neck. The ice-cold fingers made Ashley flinch, but she just said, "You know what they say, cold hands, warm heart." The phrase made them giggle, and upon finishing, they laid their heads next to each other. Ashley's heart was racing and fluttering in ways so enjoyably alien to her. Her brain bounced around her head in a spree of unceasing celebration. The only unenjoyable experience of the embrace was her dry lips. She quickly sought to neutralize this inhibitor of intimacy. Ashley danced in and around the store, picking up the water she needed. She took a few gulps. This proved difficult with the smile still stuck on her face, though it was an easier task after she walked out into the parking lot and found another, more attractive girl wrapped around Michael. The revolting sight ate through her insides and nearly made her collapse. The world spun around her in a twisted merry-go-round. Her face was rufescent and trenched as tears emanated from her eyes. It was from her soft whimper that Ashley gained the attention of her peers. She didn't stay in their direct gaze long, because her embarrassing appearance caused her to race away and down the road, but not before she slipped and fell on the icy road, causing loud laughter from the direction she left. Ashley got home late, after walking for hours and having several more fits of crying. When she walked in the front door, she ignored her parents and immediately went up to her room. Exhaust forced her to collapse on her bed and wallow in her own self-pity. She closed her eyes and tried to forget what happened, and woke several hours later in a flurry. Ashley remembered the necessity of her parents showing up at parent-teacher conference. She quickly ran downstairs, told them the situation, how they only had little time to show up. Understandably, her parents were furious, and they yelled at the young girl for her negligence. This made more tears drip down her face as they went out the door. The next morning, Ashley's mom woke her up as usual. However, Ashley pretended to be asleep when she heard her mother's frail and soft voice. "Good morning, darling. Wake up." Ashley desperately didn't want to go to school, but was forced to break her act when her mother placed a cold hand on her neck. This obviously caused her to flinch and acknowledge her consciousness. Her mother giggled and said, "Cold hands, warm heart." That was, however, the last thing Ashley wanted to hear. She buried her head into her pillows and shooed her mother away. When Ashley was eventually ready to be awoken, she walked downstairs to her already prepared breakfast and packed lunch. Traffic was a cluster on her way to school. It got to the point that her bus had to take an alternate route. Good, she thought. I don't want to see that store ever again. Once the bus arrived at school, she tried desperately not to be seen. But she was. Mr. Garth called her to his office, and she obliged. She plopped herself in front of his desk and prepared for the results of last night's meeting. Why were your parents not here last night? He said, trying to mask his anger. What? What do you mean? Ashley replied, shocked. At that moment, Mr. Garth got a disturbing call. It was for the young girl in his office. Ashley picked it up. Last night, a couple was killed in a car accident. They were speeding down the road when they spun out of control on the ice-covered road. After spending the entire night in the morgue, the bodies were finally identified as Lucy and Doug Adams, parents of Ashley Adams. Ashley remembered her morning, her mother's frail voice, and ice